it doesn't even occur to them that this could affect them.
The menstrual cycle is a very powerful tool when it comes to energy because our energy naturally fluctuates.
How would you say women lawyers can optimize their energy levels?
Awareness is everything. When you start to understand why it's happening, it gives you a bit of a motivation to make even one small change.
I can't control my weeks because it depends what comes in from clients, it depends what my manager gives me. It's uncontrollable. What would you say to them? We're obsessed with time management. Hear me out. Calendars, schedulers, but what if we're managing the wrong thing? Because time isn't the problem. You can have an empty day and still feel exhausted. You can finish early and still feel drained. The real issue? Energy. No one teaches us how to manage it, but it's the thing that fuels everything else. So maybe it's not about how many hours you work. Maybe it's about how you feel during those hours. Today I'm sitting down with Grace Williams to get expert advice on how to manage stress and burnout through energy management in law. She's an ex-White & Case solicitor turned health and nutrition coach. So Grace, obviously a lot of lawyers have to bill their time, so time is a massive factor when they are working. And I think a lot of lawyers actually don't think about the value of their energy and how much their energy can be completely drained by tasks, and therefore the time it takes them to do things can sometimes be slightly irrelevant because they're not fully doing their best or at their most peak level of energy in order to be the most productive that they can possibly be. So in saying that, how do you think energy management can impact not only the quality of work, but also avoid things like high levels of stress and burnout compared to simply just tracking their hours?
I think this is where we have to draw the distinction between the external and the internal. So the hours that you work is an external metric. What we really want to do is harness the power of our internal biological metrics to make that output and the hours worked as effective and productive as possible. And there's sort of two ways that we can think about this for everyone. Everyone knows their circadian rhythm, sort of, or has heard of it. It's the sleep-wake cycle. It's what we wake up in the morning, we go to bed at night. We've got that 24-hour biological clock. But we also have these smaller rhythms throughout the day, which are called ultradian rhythms. And these dictate all the different systems in the body. So each, our cells, our respiratory system, our hormone, they will all have different rhythms. But when it comes to the energy piece, we can use that to our advantage, because what that means is these smaller sort of ups and downs, peaks and troughs, are that we can't function at 100% from 9 a.m. in the morning until 7 p.m. at night. We just can't, like, our brain is not wired to do that. But what you can do instead is actually start noticing, when do you have those bursts of energy, the bursts of productivity, and when are you then noticing it dip? On average, studies show that it's probably around 90 minutes to 120 minutes that you get a burst of like really being able to focus on something, and then you need a break. And that break is just doing something completely opposite to what you were doing before. So if you were sitting down and not really moving, the idea is then to get up and get some movement in. If you have been focusing on a task, can you then go have some space somewhere? So whether it's getting outside, going on a walk, doing something completely different to what you've been doing for the previous 90, 120 minutes. And it was Ernest Rossi, who was a therapist, who came up with this idea of the sort of high brain activity and low brain activity. And what happens so often in corporate culture is the external takes over and we stop tuning into our body. So we stop listening to what's coming up for us. So when you say, oh, I don't really think I get like a low point of energy, actually I'm able to function all day, that is because we are so tuned out from that signaling from our body. The same when it comes to hunger signals, when it comes to stress signals. We don't notice them coming up until quite a late point because we've just dulled it all out with the like, I've got to get this done, I'm doing this task, I'm doing this, and the rational and the productivity side takes over. But our body isn't functioning at its best when we're doing that. And I think with all of these things, it's you just want to be the best that you can be. So why not make a really small change? That is, those are long periods of time, 90 minutes to 120 minutes. That's a long stint that you can really be focusing on something. But then being very intentional with like, I'm now going to take, the ideal is 20 minutes, but even 5 minutes would be good, which could be you get up and you go get a coffee, or you go fill up your water bottle, you go stand outside, you go have a conversation with someone that breaks up the task that you're doing. And you'll find when you go back to that task, you have then been so much more productive. And actually, the work that you do is more clearly thought through. It's you're not having to go back and be like, God, I need to correct so many things there, because you're tuning into how your brain wants to work and how it's working at its best. And so the problem is we are overriding years of, or sorry, we're sort of trying to undo years of overriding the signaling, which is what we've been doing. So it's tuning back into those. The other biological process that's really important as women is our hormonal cycles. And this is something that, again, when I said around our career and health being something that's, well, two things that are very separate, we never are going to think that our cycle is maybe being affected by work, or that actually we can use our cycle to our advantage. But the menstrual cycle is a very powerful tool when it comes to energy, because our energy naturally fluctuates over, if we use 28 days as sort of the average, our energy is fluctuating over those 28 days. And we really want to be using ourselves as much as possible to support that, from a productivity perspective, but also that's how you stop the physical symptoms. That's how you stop irregular periods. If you are someone that gets really bad PMS symptoms, if you are operating the same throughout the month from day 1 to day 28 of your cycle, if you never change what you're doing, you're basically not listening to your body, because actually your body will be wanting different things. So to break it down as simply as possible, you have your follicular stage and you have your luteal stage. And follicular is the time, so the first half of your cycle, luteal is the second half. And you want to think, to keep it very simple, the week before and the week that you're on your period are your lowest points energy wise. That's when the nourishment needs to come in. That's when you need to be, not just from a sort of what you're doing perspective, but at work, I mean, but also like, what exercise are you doing? If you're doing HIIT throughout the month, actually, can we start bringing those in line with your cycle to just support your energy through this? And what that's then going to do is really change how you're performing at work. Creativity changes throughout the cycle as well. It's a really interesting side of sort of the studies that is going on of, actually, you're a lot more creative when you're in your follicular stage. So the period just after your period, those few weeks afterwards is when you're going to be really creative. Whereas actually, can you reserve, if you have say in it, I think this is the hard piece. There is a level of like, you can't dictate what tasks you have to do, but to the level that you can you leave the really sort of more admin type tasks for when you're on your period, the week before your period, when you know your energy is going to be low? But if you need to think of a new idea, you need to come up with a new strategy, do that in the time after your period, because the creativity is going to be there and you're using your body to support yourself sort of through that. And as I said, you can't always control the work piece, but it's then thinking of like, okay, if I know it's the week before my period and I know work is going to be really stressful, what am I doing around that to support myself? I'm going to make sure, instead of doing really intense workouts or even doing like a big reformer Pilates class, I'm going to just do walks. I'm going to cut out the exercise, still get movement in. Movement is more important than exercise generally every single day. Getting that movement in through walks, rather than adding stress on top of work and then exercise and then probably not fueling ourselves properly, that all then is what leads to things like PMS, painful periods, breakouts every single month, those things that we complain about. We talk about stress being normal. We also normalize PMS symptoms. We make that a very normal part of how we're feeling. But using this really as a way to use the power of the cycle to really, boost your energy and productivity in different ways, that then you're tuning back into your body. And it's when you start tuning back in that you notice more and more. Symptoms are just signals from the body. They are literally your body trying to tell you something. It's the only way it can communicate with us. But the more we push those to the side, the more we go, oh, that's normal, or yeah, I'm supposed to feel like that, the less our body is going to give us those signals. And so we just completely dull ourselves out of them.
That's so interesting, because I think a lot of people just go through their work lives not even thinking this, or it doesn't even occur to them that this could affect them. I'm pretty sure I heard this, but I think the 9 to 5 work day slash work year was created for men, because obviously
Mm.
men were, way back when, men were the ones working. Whereas I think I read this, and don't quote me on it, but it just doesn't fit the body of women, the 9 to 5 work day or year.
So men's hormones run on a 24-hour clock. So they regenerate their hormones every 24 hours. But we have the monthly cycle. So that's why every day a man can go to bed, wake up, and they've got a whole new cycle. We then experience that over, on average, a 28-day period. So when we're talking about energy and how we feel, that's why over the month we have these complete changes in how we feel. And if we are functioning every single day in the same way, it's going to be affecting ourselves physically, because we're putting such a demand on our body at times when actually we're supposed to be winding down. We're supposed to be supporting our body through it. The amount of energy our body needs to reproduce is huge, even to just run the cycle. And if you think about stress as a big piece here, when we are in fight or flight, everything that's not needed for survival is switched off. So that includes our digestion, but obviously the big one is going to be your reproductive hormones, because your body's like, well, I'm running away from a tiger. Why am I going to have a baby? So all of that switched off. So when we think, it's like, well, if we're in that stress state and people then are saying, oh, I have irregular periods is something I'm struggling from, or I'm missing periods, I haven't had my period for a few months, whatever is coming up there, it's like, well, stress is a big piece of that, because ultimately those processes are going to be turned off while you're stuck in fight and flight, because your body isn't, it's like, well, why am I going to do that? Like, this isn't the right time. So I don't need that process turned on. What we want to make sure is that these processes are functioning as optimally as possible and really are supporting you. You're supporting your body through that, so that these things aren't coming up in that way and then leading to the physical symptoms that we push to the side. And again, it's this whole like vicious cycle with it. But it's a really interesting, yeah, I think the 9 to 5, we're not all wired. And actually, I think generally as well, some people are night owls, some people are morning people. Like the 9 to 5, it's such a hard structure to sort of stick by, in the sense of like our biological clocks are all very different. And so I always say, is in as much as it's possible, try and tailor it to you. If you know that you are a lot more productive in the evening or late in the afternoon, then really use that to your advantage. Instead of it being like, okay, well, I'm going to go to a workout class at 6 p.m., do that in the morning. And then you know that you're really productive at 6 p.m. So that can be the time that you do your work. I always say these, like, take it with a pinch of salt, because there are the constraints of the environment that you're in, the firm you're at. But in as much as possible that you can tailor it to you and what works for you, how you like to work, that's a really powerful starting point to start tuning back into these things and realizing that energy is the most important factor when it comes to these things, because how energized you feel will dictate the motivation you have for your work, the boost that it gives you, or is it something that completely drains you? And it all sort of links to those things.
Mm-hmm. How would you say women lawyers can optimize their energy levels in order to be more productive, but also able to, I guess, respect their bodies more or look after their bodies more?
A big piece always for me is nourishment, and that comes down to both physically, in the sense of what are you eating, but also how are you moving your body. So when I said around movement and exercise being two different things, we think of like, okay, if I need to get movement in, but that has to be an intense workout class, or it has to be a 45-minute workout. Actually, our bodies are wired to move, in the sense of like, it is getting up and having points of movement throughout the day, which could be a 5-minute walk. It could be 10 star jumps while you're waiting for the kettle to boil if you're working from home. It's like that type of movement is more nourishing to the body than an intense workout class and then sitting down all day. That's actually been classed as the active couch potato, is like the term that's now being used for people that do a workout in the morning and then sort of push it all to the side and then sit for the rest of the day. But it's then thinking about food from a food perspective. Over the cycle, our body needs different things. So when we're in that sort of week before our period and while we're on our periods, our body needs really softly cooked, nourishing food that is easy to digest, because the change in hormones are dictating how well processes in our body are working. So at that point, progesterone is taking over, and then while we're on our period, our hormones are very, very low. But progesterone is the slower hormone. It's the thing that slows things down. So your digestion is slower, your energy is less. So that's why we want to bring in things like, that's when soups and stews, and actually cacao is such a great thing to have at that point in time. Really support yourself with those types of foods that are nourishing, soft on the body, and really give you the energy sort of boost in a way that is very lovely. When we then come to the other side of our period, estrogen starts to take over. And estrogen is the more sort of, everyone's like, it's the party hormone, it's the more fun one, it's the energy one. So that's when you can think of bringing in things like, if you love more intense workouts, if you love HIIT, if you love running, bring those in at that point when you know that your hormones are supporting you from an energy perspective. And that's also when you can have things like salads and raw food that need more digesting and breaking down, that actually later on in your cycle are harder to do. So there are the 4 phases, but it's almost looking at these 2 sides of it. I think that's the simplest way to do it, of like, when you've got more energy, when your body can do more, that's the push time. And that can be at work as well. That's when you can push more. And then you have the 2 weeks after that. If you can't change the push at work, change the push that's on you externally, from the sense of like the workouts you're doing, how you're eating, how much sleep you're getting. Know that we, as women, it's proven that we need more sleep than men. So making sure that your sleep is really good quality sleep as well. Again, I'm not going to focus on hours because that's just putting an unattainable number on sort of the reality. But good quality sleep means getting natural light in the morning. Again, it can be 5 minutes, as much as you can, get that natural light to turn on serotonin production. And then in the evening, I always say like a sunset environment. So when you notice that the sun is going down, turn the lights down as well. If you're in the office, turn the overhead ones off and have just the one next to your desk on. Like, really switch it up so that you're getting your body ready for like, okay, we're now supposed to be winding down, even though from a brain perspective, you are still functioning on quite a high level, I'm sure. But it's just the small things you can do to support your body through these energy processes. And yeah, for women, food is such a big piece, because I guess from society and years of it, we've underfueled ourselves, and we're fueling ourselves with foods that are very empty, in the sense that they're not giving us the nourishment that we need. But we really want to be bringing in the things that are supporting us with all of the nutrients, whether it's magnesium. B vitamins are huge for energy, and things like dark leafy greens, good quality protein. Those are good sources of B vitamins and magnesium, iron, all of the things that we need for our energy to also support us through our cycles, that we want to be bringing those in as much as possible. And it's never has to be complicated. It can be so small. It can be, you look at the buffet and you're like, oh, there's some dark green there, I'm going to add that to my plate. You then just know you're getting some of that in and giving your body the support that it needs at that time.
Really great points, and so interesting what you say about energy, and I guess making the most of the energy that you have and optimizing it in the right ways. I think a lot of lawyers listening to this will probably think, well, that's all, well and good, and it's easier said than done. But in reality, it's, I can't control my weeks, because it depends what comes in from clients. It depends what my manager gives me. It's uncontrollable. What would you say to them?
I'd 100% agree. I wouldn't try and even debate that at all, because that's 100% true. But I think the difference is when you notice, so say it's the week before your period and suddenly a client is wanting this big thing by the end of the week, you then know. So the problem is, often we berate ourselves for not feeling energized and not having the energy. We sort of were like, oh, why do I not feel like this? Why am I so exhausted? I've done something wrong. And you start to blame yourself for it. But actually, if you know that, okay, that's the week for my period, this is why my energy is low, the calm and trust that brings you is huge, because you suddenly have a reason that is not because you did something wrong. It's also not fully on the job. And you can't then be like, oh, well, it's all to blame on this client. You don't want to get to that point, and you don't need to. Actually, what this is doing is it's allowing you to tune into what's happening internally, so that you have a reason behind it. And then, as much as possible, it might just be that you don't make your exercise class at 6 a.m. that next morning, and you're okay with that, because you're like, you know what, me not going to that class is me keeping my energy up in this week when it's naturally lower. It's that thing, these are the natural rhythms that we want to just be aware of. Yes, the ideal is that you support them all the time, but I don't do it now. I don't have like the week off. Some people will be like, oh, we should all take the week off while we're on our period. I don't do that, because that isn't conducive to me running my business. But what I am is I'm very aware of when that's happening. And so if I then go to blame myself of being like, you didn't get enough sleep or you didn't do this, it's like, no, Grace, let's look at the bigger picture of what's all these different factors that are coming in that are making me feel that way. And it's like when we spoke about that awareness piece, awareness is everything. When you start to understand why it's happening, it gives you a bit of a motivation to make even one small change. You realize that you're in a period, okay, I'm going to really focus on slow cooked foods, slow roasted vegetables, soups. Like you go pick up a soup rather than a raw salad. Like that salad is going to be so hard to digest versus the soup that your body's going to be like, thank you, nutrients, easy for me to break down and get so much more from it, rather than something raw that leaves you really bloated and uncomfortable afterwards. That small switch, you've then done something for yourself in that week when your energy is naturally lower. So yeah, I wouldn't try to debate it. There is always going to be times when you can't do these things, but just having, you're not blaming yourself for it at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's about managing what you have in your control as opposed to worrying about what's not in your control.
Yeah.
And I guess, like you say, it's about what are you eating, thinking about the different options. Like you mentioned, like I didn't even know that eating a salad is harder to digest than a soup, although it makes perfect sense, but it just wouldn't occur to me. So like little things like that, I guess. I think it's a good point actually. I think another thing that women lawyers could do is if they have the option to potentially work from home. So then they're not having to wake up to commute to go to the office. Even that commute can be a bit stressful on your body if you're having to
Yeah.
get public transport or even just having to leave the house at a certain time, and you can have more of a relaxing morning in comparison and kind of be in your own comfort and space. And I think that could probably help quite a bit.
Definitely. And it's even just the smallest things of not having to think about what you're going to put on for the day. It's taking the number of decisions off your plate and being like, okay, yeah, let's take that load off, take one thing off. And if you can, yeah, decide to work from home and really use that time to the time that you would have commuted. Can you get some more work done in that? And then maybe you can finish at it again. That's probably an ideal because you always say that and something else comes in the evening, but it's using the time effectively in the sense of, okay, I'm going to use this for something else. I'm going to take that load off, because all of these things, like we spoke about the stress bucket, it's how much are you adding to your plate? If you are in that time when you realize your energy is really low, what can you do to take off it? And if working from home is an option, that's quite a big one, because I find the commutes one of the most exhausting parts of the day. A commute is so stimulating with the people around you, getting the train, like all of the noises, all of those different things. So like you say, you take that off and it's a big sort of adjustment away from that.
Yeah, definitely.
So I am a health and nutrition coach, and I work with clients to redefine what high performance means and looks like for them through both nutrition and lifestyle changes. And this is really about bridging the gap between your health and your career so that you can keep your output and your performance at that level that you really want it to be, but feel completely different while you're doing it. This is something that massively comes from my own personal journey. So I actually started my career as a solicitor. I was at White and Case for 6 years, trained and qualified there. And while I was there, I went through experiences with burnout and grief. So for 3 years of those 6, which is slightly terrifying to say, I was a full-time carer to my parents. They both went through cancer diagnoses at the same time. So when I say I understand what being under a lot of pressure, what finding balance, what all of those things mean, I really do mean it. And it's now very much about taking all of those strategies and those personal experiences to the work I do now to really just transform how someone feels while they're doing the job that they love. And it completely changes how you feel and show up every single day. I'm also very fortunate to work with law firms, whether that's with employees or with the firms themselves, to bring these conversations to the companies, because I think they are just topics that need to be spoken more about and can really change the experience for people within the firm that you're working at. So I really love that piece as well. I still get my connection to a career that I really did love, and so I don't feel like I've lost any of that, which is heaven. But yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Grace Williams. I'm sure we'll be linking it, but yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of More Than a Law.